Welcome back to the final episode of our Lens and Legacy podcast, summing up our senior project. Overall, it's been quite a journey, and I think we learned a lot. And we're really excited for our final episode here, where we'll discuss Almost Famous and La La Land, two of our favorite films that we are happy to rewatch. I'm joined by
Jackson Canales.
Tommy Lottie.
And Nolan Huang.
All right, beginning with Almost Famous, what does this movie say about growing up? You know, somewhat of a consistent theme with a lot of the movies we've watched, finding your voice, and especially how does it make commentary on how the people you're surrounded by influence your character?
Well, I mean, it's really about trying to interpret those around you and what they want from you versus what they want in general, you know? So you're put in the eyes of a kid who's been kind of out of place his whole life. I mean, he's 2 years younger than everyone thinks he is. He's in a grade he shouldn't be, and he's this smart, he's a brilliant kid, but he's got all these pressure, and the whole movie is about pressure from other people. And I think what it's really about is what he's trying to find. What does he want? So I think that's a good outline. You want to talk about the outline before we get into the specifics?
Yeah, I mean, William, throughout the movie, he's just surrounded by people who are so much older and really just so different than him. And it reflects what the movie, I think, is going for, is how, you know, the behind the scenes of everything is so much more different and complicated than you could ever expect. You know, these fans, they see this band perform and, you know, they get a great performance, they get live music, and then behind the scenes, everything is just crumbling and these dynamics are shifting. And all these people, they want to get something out of everyone else. And I think it reflects how selfish the music industry and the world in general really is.
I mean, everyone around William is pretty much trying to use him one way or another. And he, as a character, I feel like he represents what was great about music, something that's referenced a lot, and that's the purity of it, and being relentlessly honest versus trying to work your way up in this industry, which is really about what can I get from this person, what can I get from this, and less about what can I give, which is interesting because you think of music as giving. Something you can share with a lot of people. Every performance, you're giving them sound, and you're giving yourself to be part of the band. But all you see is when you're behind the scenes, when you're backstage, when you're reporting on these people, is how much they take from each other. And even though a band seems like a cohesive unit on stage, the few times we see them perform, most of the stuff on the tour bus with the groupies, it's all conflict, and it's an interesting point of view seeing it from someone who's new to it and can't really, he's toting the line between wanting to be accepted by these people and also wanting to be a serious reporter.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting character in the way that we kind of see William go throughout the music industry. It's definitely an interesting way to show the industry and its flaws, as well as its benefits and its beauty all together.
Yeah, so kind of like a real life connection I have here. So my brother is actually he's a music production major in California, and he's working with a pretty big name, and he's talked to some other fellow producers, and they've kind of talked about getting gypped out of stuff and fallouts between partnerships due to, like, you know, greed and wealth and success. And it kind of shows you, I'm not going to name who it is, of course, but the toxicity behind a field that you expect unity and teamwork and synchronization. So yeah, and this movie very well encapsulates the real side of the industry.
I think the character of Penny Lane and her relationship with Russell is really interesting, how she's really just getting used throughout the movie. And I think a lot of the groupies are just getting used throughout the movie. And like what Nolan said, there's a lot of selfishness and greed. And I think the relationship that all these musicians have with the women in their lives, it shows the greed that they have just in general in their character and how they're really just kind of in it for themselves, even though with a band you expect them to be working together, but it's really everyone's playing their own game.
And for a little bit of context, something that I feel like makes the movie a little bit more interesting, something that I learned after the fact, was that so this film by Cameron Crowe is almost in some ways a true story of himself when he was a kid. When he was younger, he somehow got to interview and travel with Led Zeppelin, one of the most important rock bands of these times, that you see their records within the movie, you hear their songs played, so you kind of get those little Easter eggs. So I feel like knowing that it's somewhat based off his own experiences makes everything so much more accurate. I mean, it's definitely something that 99.9% of people don't know what happens behind each song, behind the artist, what happens on tour. And I feel like that kind of adds to the authenticity of the movie. In many ways, I feel like it does feel real. I mean, I can't say that for certain. I don't know, but like I trust things through the eyes of this character in William, who just loves music, and will do anything for this band that everyone tells him would do nothing for him, which kind of gets flipped on its head at the end through Penny Lane's interference and kind of forcing Russell Hammond, the lead guitarist, to kind of give back to the people, which are talked about. I know you know this throughout the entire movie. All they talk about is the fans and the people, and they're kind of called out for not really pitting these people that they are so-called do it for, not actually putting them where they say putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, I think really the main theme of the discussion is just greed, and these people, are they really doing it for the fans? I think not, honestly. I think that they do it because the fans boost their ego, and I think that's kind of a theme that you see even in the real world with musicians, how ego just destroys bands. You see it with the Beatles. And, obviously one of the fallout between Paul and John, something that nobody really saw coming until it was too late. And I think that shows that these journalists get this behind the scenes view that really the world doesn't see. And I think that's really important. And that shows that these journalists have a very important place in the music industry.
I think this film having the theme of music being kind of prevalent and being kind of a harbinger for the message it's trying to deliver kind of talks more to the like intersectionality of music and film as a medium for social commentary. And I think an important question to consider is how this film uses music to express how characters are feeling at different times in the film.
Well, just like Dazed and Confused, this is a movie that is very much not carried, but the soundtrack plays a huge role. I mean, my favorite use of song in this movie, and it's one that I feel like has become very iconic, is Tiny Dancer. Obviously a great song, but the way it's used as the background, the soundtrack of the movie, as well as actually being sung and appreciated by the characters on the bus, I feel like the best way that music is used within movies is when it's shared by both the audience and the characters, something that during the drives and Dazed and Confused, something we got to kind of share with the characters and be part of the moment. But I feel like the songs, I mean, there's songs throughout the entire movie. Each scene, even the quick little snippets, if you remember the short scene where Penny Lane was dancing, they gave a quick song of 15 seconds and the mood was flipped just like that. And then the next scene, it's another song. And I think the songs do a good job of highlighting the emotions that Crowe really wants us to feel.
Another really interesting thing about the movie I felt while watching was the way it was paced and how it was shot. I think Cameron Crowe really uses his artistic gift in this movie, and I think one of the most critical scenes throughout the film is the scene on the plane when the plane's about to crash. And first time watching that, I felt a jolt when that happened. It really came as extremely unexpected, and it shows how, these people, their true colors come out in the most dire times when they all think they're about to die on the plane. And the relationship between the lead singer and the lead guitarist, even while they're about to die, the egos come through and they prioritize what they want, and the greed that they feel, and how they just want to be, number one, the front of the band.
I think it's a very interesting point that lets us perhaps transition into another film that tries to tackle music, fame, and relationships, and human interconnectivity as a whole. Being La La Land, obviously being a musical, music takes an even more prevalent front seat in this film. But what is this film saying about dreams, especially related to an artistic industry such as music, and how does that film maybe make commentary on the sacrifices that are needed to be made in order to chase your dreams and achieve success? As obviously both the characters achieve some element of success in the end, but audiences are felt, you feel like there's something missing. And that kind of scene in the final end of the movie, there's a sense of longing between the two characters where, even though they both, Seb obviously achieves his goal of owning his own jazz bar, and Mia becomes, a world famous actress, but you still feel like they didn't reach a true sense of success. So, what is the trade-off, and what is the movie kind of making commentary on as a whole?
Well, it's fascinating to me how a movie like La La Land shows how intertwined film and music are and have been, and how these two main characters have very different passions and aspirations, but they make it work, and they're able to blend their skills and their loves, and how they're able to succeed. And I think that happens in the movie itself as well, the way it uses music and film, where it is a musical, but it doesn't really feel like your typical musical like The Wizard of Oz did, where this movie, the music really just feels, the way it works with the film itself, it's a very surreal watch, and I think that's reflected through the way the movie uses colors and lighting, and I think that is to me is where the movie really excels.
And I think that it reminded me of Casablanca in a lot of ways, especially in the structure of its love dynamics. It's very unique. I feel like a lot of love stories and rom-coms are very formulaic and they end the same way. But in this film, much like Casablanca, the truest form of love is sacrifice, in which these characters love each other so deeply, but also they understand that in order to achieve what is right for them and achieve their dreams, they kind of have to go their separate ways. And I think that doesn't take away from the love that they had or the things they felt. I think that only strengthens them in a lot of ways. The fact that they can love each other so much that they're willing to let each other go in order to serve their purpose and live their life. I think that that's something I noticed from all the way back when we were in those early 1900s. It's a theme that isn't tackled a lot in movies. And I think that's something that stuck to me, as though it's a sad movie. Everyone agrees with that. And these two people that you want to be together can't be together. It still feels full, like the love is there and important.
I would say that something that, to add on to what Jackson was saying, the ending of the movie where where they do both achieve their dreams shows that, but that having it all might be a myth, and they didn't get the storybook ending of achieving their dreams and living together, but it kind of shows that you have to make sacrifices in order to find the success that you want to find in life. And I think this underscores that their love thrived the most where their ambitions didn't, and vice versa, which is kind of the beauty of the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, another interesting connection between this film and Almost Famous is maybe, the identity of both directors. Damien Chazelle, obviously music was a big part of his life because he was a musician by trade before a director. And, his kind of big break was Whiplash, which was a commentary on the gravity of the music industry and the mental health impacts that chasing fame and chasing perfection can kind of lead to. Similar to, Almost Famous, the director himself, I'm sure, had an element of similar personal anecdote that went into the writing of the film. And I think that's really interesting because now we're seeing maybe a transition as we get closer to modern day, where directors are more at ease, or are more inspired to use elements of their own life and their own personal experiences to tell a story, and rather so relying on maybe a story that's already been told, or like Jackson said, following like a framework that reflects a certain kind of idea or something that they know is going to sell. I think both these films are doing something pretty interesting and pretty personable, and you maybe feel the authenticity of some of those emotions because of that reason, because of the directorial narrative.
Yeah, to me, Chazelle has a really distinct and appealing style, and I think that really comes through with La La Land in the way he uses colors, and how the colors, similar in the way where in The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, the music is a character in and of itself. It seems to me like the colors are almost like a character in the way that they're so deliberately chosen, and they're so distinct, and they encapsulate everything the movie's trying to say. I think that really shows how much Chazelle loves movies and how much he cares about these films, and the minutia that he takes care in these movies. I think it's really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of color, there's the obvious transition. When the film originally starts, Seb and Mia are on opposite ends of the color spectrum, and as they come together, they become closer and closer in terms of their clothes that they wear, and in terms of the places that they occupy. They're together, and there's a theme of coolness, a lot of purples and a lot of blues, and then you see towards the end of the film they're separated again, where Mia's wearing colors that are completely opposite and contrasting, and you see the stark contrast. And especially everyone's seen the iconic scene of Mia and Seb dancing for the first time, when Mia's in a yellow dress and Seb's in a dark suit. That is the idea that there are two characters who are maybe an unlikely pair coming together, and maybe an idea that they were kind of doomed from the start because they were so different and they had such different aspirations, and that although everyone in the audience was surely hoping for that storytell ending, you kind of get to the end of the story and end of the movie, and you realize that isn't what we're getting, and it ends fairly abruptly in that sense.
Well, also, I'd like to highlight the unique time structure in which we see the ways in which the two main characters, Mia and Sebastian, they bump into each other in the bar. We see we see the way it led up two different ways, and I think that kind of, I don't know, I enjoy that in movies where it's not just a linear progression. You get to see the intricacies of their day-to-day lives. I don't know, I just thought that was interesting.
I think that ending scene, and I think Damien Chazelle is known for his kind of final act being the most powerful part of the movie, and that's kind of what the lead up is all about. You see that in Whiplash, obviously, with the final act, and there's a contrast between Fletcher and Miles Teller's character, and similarly you see that between Mia and Seb, where there is this idea that they could have been, but they never tried, and the audience will never know, because when you go into that world of when they are together, there is this kind of breath of fantasy, and there is this movie and storytelling that seems not realistic, and the audience understands that. It's kind of like a story within a story, and it's a very careful and well thought out directorial choice.
It's interesting too how, like you said, there's like a breath of fantasy in this, fairy tale ending that they get to see, where they live together and they have this really happy life, but it shows that is pretty fictitious in a lot of senses, and how movies, although the movie is really fantastical in a lot of its elements, the ending feels very real, and the way that these arcs go feel like real life, and how, you don't always get the storybook ending that you think you want, but, it's possible to achieve, your dreams and to live out the life you wanted, even though it may not seem like it.
And just because they didn't end up together doesn't mean that they weren't so impactful in each other achieving their dreams. And I think that's part of the love, is that without each other and without both of them being strong enough to realize that they weren't meant to be together and that they weren't really capable of achieving their dreams together, I think that love is what led them to find each other again in a respectful way at the end, in which they can appreciate the time they had together and appreciate what they have in the moment.
Yeah, I think this film is heartbreaking for a lot of audiences, because you see them fall in love, but then ultimately they don't figure it out, and a lot of people might look at that and they might see the like he's literally me character, I think it's relatable in a sense, yeah,
Like
because
Manchester by the Sea, another great movie.
right, exactly, a lot of people I think feel that they have a sense of relatability to those characters, and that's another reflection of a trend at this time where we also watch Perks of Being a Wallflower, where the whole film is kind of designed to create a sense of like relatability to the characters, especially the protagonists in the film, to feel bad for both characters and understand their situations and understand that the reality might not always be that perfect ending that everyone kind of aspires to. But so I think in the end, this is a good film to kind of sum up the entire experience of our project. How would you say the ending of the story celebrates film, and how would you say it celebrates kind of the usage of film to make commentary, and especially just the human nature?
Well, I think it combines something that we talked about was the difference between the fantastical aspects and the realistic ones. And I think it does a great job of combining those two things, because those are really the basis of film. It's having enough relatability to your day-to-day life and the moments that make up the important moments of your life, as well as offering you an escape into a world that you're not a part of and that you can't really relate to. And I think that balancing those two is really why we watch movies and why we love film. So I think that the flash in a pan of this life that could have been, with these beautiful colors and this beautiful music, back to real life. And I think that combining those two really does say a lot about film and a lot about us as people and film enjoyers.
I think that throughout most of the movie, their relationship kind of seemed like fantasy and too good to be true, even though they had their ups and downs. But at the end of the day, once they find success in their careers, which they always dreamed of, then you kind of see how they had to sacrifice their relationship. And I think this also led to a lot of success. And as you can see in the box office, sorry, a little bit hungry now. The gross of the movie was about 400 million greater than the budget of the movie, which kind of shows how movies with such powerful themes and trends can correlate with such great success in a box office without having necessarily a high budget.
Yeah, I think this movie is a great way of summarizing the project, and it's personally my favorite movie, and I think it really is a perfect film. I don't think there's anything, it does wrong, and I think it's able to master the art that I think we've studied this whole project, and I think it's a great way to end off.
Yeah, we started with a musical with La La Land, and we're ending with one with we started the musical with Wizard of Oz, and then we're ending with one with La La Land. It's very fitting and kind of sums up that the film over time has changed, and there has been some sort of a generational curve and a reflection of different times. But in the end, film has relatively stayed more the same than different. All right, thank you.